This picture is kind of derivative of a shot that I took years ago when I first got my screw-on close-up filters for my 50mm lens. And those were my introduction to close-up macro photography. And I remember taking them around the Oklahoma State University campus and photographing everything I could find that was small at really close-up distance. And the whole world was like this new, fresh photographic blank canvas everything I saw around me was a brilliant opportunity for a macro photo. And I've since, I think I've toned it down a little bit. I don't quite see the world from that perspective anymore. And it's too bad because there really are photographic opportunities all around. And I say that constantly here on Weekly 50, and yet sometimes I don't even follow my own advice. And when my brother Phil and his family were visiting in mid-March, we came across this bolt on my neighbor's chain link fence. Like, this is not a fancy composition, and yet it makes a pretty good photo. I don't know that I would have considered this had Phil not been there with his macro lens, looking around for photo opportunities that are right in front of us. And he shot everything from like pine cones to leaves to grass and fence posts. And so that made me stop and think, like, you know what? I see this every day, but I don't often think of it as a photo opportunity. I really need to get better at this. And so here we are. But the big thing I did on this wasn't so much aperture, which is what I often talk about with macro photography, but angle of view. And you'll notice the fence in the back is blurry. So actually the aperture plays a part in this as well. I shot this at f11 and I tried from a couple different apertures. I tried a smaller aperture to get the bolt sharper. And if you look closely, you'll see it's actually slightly out of focus. The closest part to the camera is just a little blurry. And f13 or f16, a smaller aperture would have fixed that. But I really liked how blurry the fence was behind it. And I like that you can still see the crisscross metal of the fence. If I tried this at a wider aperture, like f6 or something, and it was just too blurry. There was no context for this bolt. It just looked like it was a background of nothing but gray. But a smaller aperture meant too much of the fence itself was in focus. And so I ended up at shooting this at f11 as a compromise between blurry background and clear background and subject sharpness and all of these things. I also wanted to make sure that there was actually something in the background, period. And I had to be really careful about the angle that I looked at this thing from, because if I scooted over to my right just a little bit more, then the fence was almost like you saw too much of it. But if I scooted over to the left, you didn't see enough. So there's a lot of interesting considerations in this photo that I don't normally think about. If you're on YouTube and you click to the blog link right below the video, you can scroll down and see the photo that I originally took years ago that kind of inspired this one. And it makes me think about other photos that I could take of just everyday things like rusty nails and bolts and things like that, that I often overlook. Like daily, I overlook these things, but that doesn't mean they're not interesting photo opportunities, and I need to start taking advantage of that a little more.